Hey guys, Lytane here, and I'm going to be looking at an indie game today. Now, I've already had a look at an indie game once before with Dust and Elysian Tale, but seeing as how there are so many indie games out there nowadays, and it's really the age of indie, I want to have a look at some of the games that started this age. So today, I'm going to have a look at The Binding of Isaac and see if it's worth it. The Binding of Isaac was released in 2011 and was created by Edmund McMillen and Florian Himsel for the indie game circuit. This wasn't the first game that McMillen made, however, and you may recognize his artwork from a different game. That's right, he worked on the game Super Meat Boy, which is considered by a lot of people to be one of the best indie platformers ever with its great design, humor, and gameplay. It became very popular, even getting a physical release, which is fairly uncommon for an indie game. Not long after Super Meat Boy, The Binding of Isaac was released. In this game, you play as Isaac, a small child that lives with his very religious mother. She starts hearing voices in her head that she believes to be God, and it tells her that Isaac has been a naughty boy. They then tell her that he needs to be punished for all of his naughtiness, so she locks him in his room. But that isn't enough, so God tells her that she has to take all of his stuff. But even that isn't enough, so then God tells her that she has to take his life in order to get rid of his naughtiness. Isaac hears about this and needs to escape, only to discover a trapdoor in his room. Wasting no time, he jumps in and now must take on all these monsters, abominations, and other things that lurk in the depths. Isaac's mum isn't going to let up on her attack either, as she needs to purge him from his naughtiness, and she goes down to find him as well. With all these foes to face, there are also plenty of items down there that might just help Isaac cry his way to victory. Will he succeed, or will God get his way? Only if the RNG is in your favor. The Binding of Isaac is a very ambitious game on the PC, and I say it's ambitious because of the sheer amount of things that you can see and do within this game in your entire playthrough of it. The style of this game is called a Rogue Dungeon Explorer, and what that means is that you are put into a series of rooms which are called dungeons that you must explore in order to get through the entire game, and then the rogue element is the fact that it's all randomly generated. On every floor you have a number of rooms that you must explore, ranging from a whole bunch of different types of rooms before you come to the boss, and after killing that you get to descend to the next floor or the next level as it were, and you rinse and repeat this until you finish the game. The best part about this game is that it's all randomly generated, like I said, so when you first start you have the same room every single time, but the paths leading off of it will be different. Sometimes it might be just going up, sometimes it may be a path on every single direction, and then when you go into these new rooms, they're also randomly generated, so sometimes you might fight a spider in the first room, sometimes it might just be nothing. You don't know until you explore and you play through it, and that leads to so much replayability. Sure, each floor itself leads a little bit to the restriction of the RNG, where every 2 floors has a similar color design, but then after that it changes color palette. Also, there are certain enemies that won't spawn on the earlier floors because they're a little bit too difficult. Certain bosses as well are more likely to spawn at the beginning because they're easier, and then certain bosses are more likely to spawn to the end because they're a little bit harder. So there is a little bit of restriction in order to keep the progression of the game there, but you still don't know which of these bosses, which of these enemies, or anything like that will spawn, so you just have to roll the dice every single time you play through it. This leads to the almost infinite replayability to this game. Every time you go through it, you don't know what to expect. You don't know which bosses are going to spawn, which items are going to be where, and you just go through the game and explore, and that's part of the fun. You get good at it and you get great at the mechanics and how to handle enemies, so you physically get better, but you still don't know what to expect, which adds so much variety to this game, especially as you start to unlock more things that just add to the plethora of shit that's already in here. The main way you'll be going through this game is with Isaac and using your tears as your attack. You shoot out of both eyes, so there's a slight variation on each shot, but they both go in the direction that you aim. What's good about this game is that it's a twin stick shooter of sorts, where one hand controls Isaac with the WASD keys, with the up, down, left, right keys on your keyboard firing your tears. This gives you a great amount of control in the game, which is great, because you could be running away and firing behind you or in any direction really. As you progress, you do get a few other means of attacks as well. You can drop bombs which destroy walls, blocks, and enemies, but be careful as they can harm you as well. You can also pick up tarot cards or playing cards which offer different effects, from teleportation to summoning items, which can be very useful in a pinch. You can also find special items that offer passive abilities like a higher chance to drop keys after clearing a room, or even a buddy that can follow you and help you out in a fight. You can also find items that offer a special move in a room, like turning into a unicorn for a fight or increasing your damage output. They only last a room, but if used at the right time, they can really save you from death or make victory a sure thing, and as they are pretty powerful, you can only carry one at a time, and they have a recharge rate. The last thing that you can pick up in the game are the power-ups, which offer a boost for the rest of the game, and they come in all different shapes and sizes, from upgrading your health, your attack speed, your attack range, your attack power, your speed. You can even change the way that you move around the screen or give you a special attack. They have so many different uses, and there are so many different types of them. The last thing is that all of these items stack as well, so if you pick up 2 different health upgrades, they will upgrade your health both times. Now this can be a little bit counterintuitive as well if you pick up an upgrade that does 2 different effects. So if you pick up one upgrade that pluses attack and minuses range, and then you pick up another item which adds range but then minuses your attack, then they sort of balance each other out if they give the same amount of attack and range plus and minuses, but you get what I mean. So sometimes picking up certain items will be detrimental to you, but you don't know until you go through it. Also, as you're picking up these items, there is a brief explanation at the top for a lot of them, but not all of them. And some of the explanations are very, very obscure. So you have this stuff like, it might just say tiers up. You don't know how your tiers went up, you don't know any of the stats. If you go open up the main menu, you can actually see the numbers for your stats. So if you memorized what you picked up before actually picking up, then yeah, you can see and be like, okay, my range increased by 2, I can see that physically. Or you could just play around in the room that you picked up the item and see how it works. So like if you pick up something that increases your range, you can just hold down the button to shoot and see how far your tiers go now. Some of them are a little bit more cryptic, where they don't exactly tell you what they do, and they don't tell you by how much. So sometimes like looking at the wiki online is very, very good, because there's so many items and so much to remember that it's easy to just misplace some information in your head and be like, oh wait, I didn't actually want to pick up this item because now it minuses all my attack and turns me fat. I wish they had designed it in a little bit of a better way where it's a little bit more intuitive, so I didn't need to look up a wiki or anything to find out what exactly everything does. But that also leads to part of the fun, because then you have to figure out everything, so yeah, it's a bit of a mixed bag there. But because there are so many different items and they're all randomized, every time you play through the game, it's also going to change up your play style. So in one game, you may pick up the item which lets you shoot out charged shots, the chocolate milk. And that changes the way you play, because no longer can you just hold down the button and just spam your bullets. No, if you hold down the button, it's a charge attack, which is much stronger, but it's also slower. And if you miss, well, that's it. You don't get another charge shot. You have to wait for the charge to build up again. So it's not... So it changes your entire playstyle. So now you have to go through the game with this charge shot, and you have to adapt to that. Then there's another one where you may pick up the ability to fly. So now all the hazards and traps and all the terrain don't really mean anything to you, because you just go over it. That drastically changes your playstyle once again, because no longer are you encumbered by rocks or floors and stuff like that and having to maneuver around those while fighting enemies. You can just go wherever you want and fight wherever you want now. So doing that stuff adds so much more replayability, and no 2 games are usually the same. They can be similar if you pick up the items, like if you pick up a charge shot again in a different playthrough, then yeah, your style will be a little bit similar. But what if you picked up the charge shot and the flight? Now you've opened up more possibilities, because you're starting to combine these items, and because they're all permanent, this means that you can lead to some wacky results by the time you finish the game. But one thing I really appreciate in this game is the art style and how it went way above and beyond anything that it needed to do. Every time you pick up an item, Isaac changes physically. If you pick up lard, you go fat. If you pick up devil horns, he now has devil horns. If you pick up the halo, he has a halo. If you pick up a lot of different things, his face will change, or his body will change. And it's just so cool, because then you can physically see how your character is changing. You can pick up a rock, and I'm pretty sure the rock sticks out of his head, or you can have a tumor or stuff like that, and it's just like, wow, so much thought and effort got put into this, and they all stack on top of each other as best they can. Sometimes some of them don't come through because you may have picked up another item which supersedes it in terms of looks, but the fact that they all give you a physical representation on your character is amazing. That's way crazier than anything like Mario when he changes. Yeah, he changes his clothes and his outfit, but he doesn't change his face, and there are only a certain number of power-ups in a Mario game. Same thing with Sonic, like when he collects a shield, it's just a simple shield around him. If Isaac was to collect a shield, I'm sure like his entire body would change into that shield, or if he picked a fire flower, I'm sure like his hair would be on fire or something like that. So this adds a lot of cool animations and a lot of cool style to the game, which otherwise would have just made it a little bit more bland as you're picking up these items. And not only that, but it also acts as a reminder to what you picked up, because you can see that rock in your head and you'd be like, oh yeah, I remember picking up that rock. So when you're going in later and you see something else and you can pick that up, and that adds to your face. So it's all really cool. In a game that has so many items, monsters, and rooms to explore, the replayability is almost endless. In a game like Spyro, which I covered before, after you finish a level, there's really no need to go back into it because you can do it all in one go. You can certainly replay that game, there's nothing wrong with it, but it would be pretty much the same every single time, whereas this, it's not the same ever. Then, if you're getting bored of the main game and playing as Isaac, there is even more variety that can be added as well if you so desire. There are other characters that you can use which you unlock by doing certain things in the game, and they have different starting stats and different special abilities. If you want to get 100% in the game, you'll have to finish this with everyone, and that's just to get the endings. There's still even more to do after that. Hidden away in the depths of the basement, there are some crazy things to find. Your job is to kill your mum, and at the end of the game, you do fight her. She has a giant leg that tries to crush you and a deformed body that pops out of the different areas of the map, and you have to destroy her. And after you do that, you get the first ending and everybody's happy. Well, except Isaac. Isaac is never happy. Then if you play it through a second time, you quickly find out that after defeating Mum for the first time, you unlock new levels. You then enter the womb where you must go and try and find her heart to finish her off once and for all. It's a tough fight, and you have to put lots of work into killing her and learning her patterns. What's more is that after you do certain things in the game and after you've progressed and unlocked a certain amount of stuff, the boss at the end actually gets harder with her summoning more crazy things in the fight, which is so cool. That way the game levels up to your experience because you've gone through this game so many times now that you're practically a pro, so then the game makes it harder for you to finish, which is a great idea. What's more is that there is another final secret boss that you can discover if you do certain things leading up to him, and boy is that a tough fight as well, which is so well worth it if you do finish it. Though I think that boss might be part of the expansion, to be honest, so I don't know. That's right, there is an expansion to this game called Wrath of the Lamb. Where the first thing came out, it is a massive game, and then they added the expansion which added even more bosses, items, and different types of levels all the way through, and I'm like, wow, you already had an incredible amount of things in there, now you've just added even more. Now, one thing that was a bit of a limitation for McMillen when he was making the game is the program that he used. He used Flash, if I'm not mistaken, and that has a lot of limitations as to what he could do. He couldn't make rooms that were bigger than the square that you see on the actual screen, so all the rooms had to be pretty much the same shape, but then just different inside of them. He also couldn't do certain things like certain enemies or different types of animation that he wanted to implement, and that limited a lot of his creative process. But that also meant that he had to figure out new ways of doing things in order to get his dream alive. So McMillen made the art style simplistic on purpose, where most of the bad guys and enemies look like fetuses or like rejected children and weird things like that, in order to make it simple. It's all very nice and tame in terms of colors, in terms of detail, where Isaac himself usually gets the most detail, and a couple of the bosses actually get a lot of detail as well. But aside from that, it's all a fairly simple looking game, but I still like the style. But even though there were so many limitations, McMillen didn't want to stop this game from being made because he knew it was good, but then he was never satisfied with it. So 3 years later, he made a remake of the game called The Binding of Isaac Rebirth. This took all of the original ideas that he had, and they had to be completely redone from the ground up in a new engine. That's right, everything had to be done from scratch. All of the artwork, animation, characters, items, coding, they were all done differently in order to bring this game to life, but this time without the original limitations. That meant there could be more coding and more complex items implemented in rooms that were bigger than just what that could fit on the resolution of the original screen, such as long rooms or big square rooms could now be used. It is honestly a great remake of the game, and it adds more to the game that originally had so much, and it also got released on a few different platforms like the PS4 and Vita because of the new engine could handle that. But I'll have a bigger look into that game one day in the future. But do I think the original Binding of Isaac is worth it? Yes, it is definitely worth it. This game is so incredible. The amount of replayability that it has, the amount of items that you can get, the amount of different things that you can see and explore. I didn't even talk about the fact that there are all different types of rooms, there are different types of bosses, there are different things that you could do in the game. There's just so much that it is incredible. And I also really like the art style. I like the fact that even after every time I've played through this game, there's still something new to see and discover. That just adds so much value to this game. But I will say this game is fairly difficult. The learning curve is very steep and you will die often, but when you start to learn how the different items work and how some of the enemies are easily taken care of in certain ways, you get good, and then you finally kill Mum for the first time and it feels like a great accomplishment. And then after that you only learn that there is more to this game than what you ever thought, because as you're playing through it, you're unlocking new bad guys, new bosses, new items, new areas. So when you go back and play through the game again, there's usually something new to see. There are certain times where you'll go through the game and you'll get really shit items, which sucks, and that just leads to a down time. But then you might play through the game again and get all these best items and you feel like an absolute god when you can just destroy all of the things that oppose you. While the remake is out there, I still think that this original game holds up in every way, because the remake only took what the original did and just updated the graphics and added more to it. So both games are fantastic, and I would say that either one that you play is good, but I still recommend the original even though there is a remake out. The RNG in this game can be a little bit frustrating because sometimes things won't spawn or you just won't get any hearts throughout the entire game and stuff like that. So like I said, it can be frustrating, but it's still rewarding when you do finish it. And I also know that this game is not for everybody, and that's fine, because it doesn't have to be. Like any game out there ever made, it doesn't have to be for everybody, but this game is still fun for a lot of people. It's also really influential on the world, because after this game was made, so many more RNG dungeon crawlers came out. So many, and they have their own style and their own flavor, but I really think that this paved the way for a lot of them to come out because they saw how successful this was, then they wanted to do it themselves, which is just like how most of the gaming industry works. It's like, hey look, Mario's great, okay, us at Sega, we should try and do something like that, but make it our own, and now they have Sonic. So yeah, it's a popular thing in the gaming world, and I don't say it's bad or anything, but this is definitely one of the games that started it all. So guys, don't forget to write down below in the comments what you think of the Binding of Isaac. Have you ever played it? Do you think it's good? Do you prefer the remake over the original? All that kind of stuff, and don't forget to like and subscribe. But just as a random aside as well, I bought the original game as a disc for my PC because I'm crazy like that. And it came with this incredibly creepy poster of a realized Isaac crying with the things, and it's just hella creepy. I don't know why they did this, but I don't want to hang it up because it's too scary. But the branching paths off of it will be different. Sometimes you may start the game and there's a room at the top, sometimes it may be a room at the bottom and the left. That was actually the right, but it's left on camera. And so, so guys, don't tell me what to think.